Hello, Realty Pros. Today, we're going to learn how to create a listing loop. In just a moment, one of your colleagues is going to join me, and we're going to walk through the process of actually creating a live listing loop. All right, so we've opened up our Dotloop Premium account, and the first thing we're going to do is go to Add Loop. So you're going to click on that loop button over to the left, and because this is a listing, you're going to put the property address in there. So I will add a property address. Let's put 123 Main Street, and we're going to put Training, Maryland. Okay. Now that's going to be our property address, but we want to actually put the client's first name, last name, the transaction type. So this is going to be Sally Seller, listing, and then the property address. So as we can see, we've named it with the first name, last name, transaction type, and then property address. Trust me, once you start to get a lot of transactions in your Dotloop Premium account, you'll be very happy that you named it this way. Okay, so that's the first step, and simply click on continue. When you click continue, you're going to look at loop template, and you're simply going to select listing template, and then click continue. You don't need to upload a photo, and you are finished. So Dotloop is creating the loop for you. So that's how simple it is to create your listing loop. But now that you've created it, we're going to have to actually go inside the loop to fill in all of the pertinent information. Okay, so we're going to double click there, or we could simply click on the right and go to view loop. So as Dotloop opens up that loop, there's some information that we're going to need to have in advance. We're going to need to have the property information, the property details, and all of those good things so as to fill it in. Okay, so we have this as a listing for sale. We're going to select the loop status. Currently, this is a pre-listing. Okay, once it's under contract, active, sold, withdrawn, you would simply update it there. But here's one of the most important fields where it has view details, because this is where you're going to fill all of the information in that will then auto-fill into the rest of the documents that we're going to go over. So you saw how, I'll go back one more time. Go back to the loop, and you simply click on that view details tab that's right up at the top of your screen right here. And this is where you're going to fill in all of the information for your listing documents. Okay, so you've used a custom name, which is your client's name, transaction type, and property address. Now you're going to go ahead and walk down this entire screen and add as much information as possible. If you have all of the information, that's great. And I'll show you how to go back and forth between the tax record to pull some things that may be missing. All right, but we're going to start at the top and walk our way down. So as we start, we're going to add a person. The people that you know right offhand are your sellers. So you have Sally Seller, her email address, and of course, Sally Seller is not a real person, but you go ahead and put in your seller's actual name. There you go. And now you want to assign the role. And in order to complete this step, you have to assign the role, and you're going to do the exact same thing for each person in this transaction. So you're simply going to choose seller. Now it's going to ask you some more information about Sally Seller. It's going to want to know what Sally's street address is, if Sally has a company name, let's see, street number, city, postal code, marital status, cell phone number, and all of that information. So you're actually going to fill in as much information there as possible. For now, I'm simply going to add this person, and we'll come back to it. Okay. Next, you want to add yourself as the listing agent. Okay. So you're going to add your own name. And you're going to assign your role. So you're the listing agent, and add that person. Now, of course, you actually want to have all of your property information, your company information, street address, and all of that within your actual person field. That way it'll populate into your other documents. So go to add person. Okay, so we'll come back and complete those, but I want to go ahead and scroll down to the property information. So here is where you would put your property address. If you wanted to look up a property, put that information right there, and you see how it found it and populated that information. Now, there's some things that you will have to find. So you see it put Maryland as the county, so you definitely want to scrub it. Although it'll autofill it for you, you want to verify and make sure that it's accurate and it put the appropriate information in the appropriate spaces. Okay. All right, so you're going to scroll down and fill in all of this information. You're going to add financial information. So what is the commission that's going to be in your listing agreement? Okay. You can skip over contract dates and offer dates for now because you don't have a contract on the property or a buyer's an offer to purchase the property just yet. Once you get it listed, then you'll start getting offers to purchase the property. But for now, you're just going to scroll on down and go to listing information. So your listing date is what you want to put in there. Your listing expiration date, the original list price, current price. If there's a first and second mortgage on the property, you want to add that information. If there are any other liens, such as a reverse mortgage, or if there's a home equity line of credit or something like that, tax lien or any other type of lien that's on the property, you want to put that information there. Add the description. If the property has a homeowners association, you want to add that information into the appropriate fields as well. The homeowners association dues, you want to make sure that you put that. Any encumbrances on the property, you want to put whatever the dollar value is that's there. And if the property includes any additional amenities that are outside of the structure itself, then you want to go ahead and include that there. Now, actually, your inclusions and exclusions are better suited in the actual document that we'll go over. Remarks, you can add them there, but they don't necessarily populate in the place that you would want them to. The place that you actually want to put those remarks is going to be in Bright MLS. So you can walk past that for now, right? You do want to go and get your legal description. And in order to find your legal description, you're going to get this from Bright MLS. So you're actually going to open Bright MLS. You're going to have it open in the background and pull up your legal description, the name of the subdivision, the lot, the block. And as we scroll down, you're going to find your tax ID for the property also, the year that the property was built, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, the square footage, the type of property that it is, the lot size, and so forth and so on. So once you've gotten through all of that information, then this information will be ready to pre-populate or to auto-fill into your documents, okay? So remember, we had to come back to these fields up here. These are your persons in the transaction thus far. So your people are going to be your listing brokerage, which is Porterhouse International Realty Group, and you're going to assign that. That's not going to be admin, that's going to be listing broker, and then you're going to edit that, and you're going to put all of the appropriate information in there, such as what you see here. So you see Porterhouse International Realty Group as company name, street address or street number, street name, suite, and so forth and so on. Make sure that all of this information is there. And you're going to use this exact same information for yourself as a listing agent, okay? So you're going to make sure that you put that same information under yourself as the listing agent. If for your seller, you want to make sure that you add your seller's full address, the seller's telephone number, email address, and everything else that you have for your seller, the marital status. You want to put it all in this field so that it'll go into the documents that are appropriate. And you save that information. And once you save it, you'll see save successfully. And when you go back to the loop, and once it gets back to the loop, then we're going to scroll down and look at the documents, because this is how you're actually going to autofill your documents. So now we simply click on listing documents because this is our folder that has all of the listing documents that we need. This one, the standard one, is for Prince George's County, but our library on the back has all of the other counties that you'll need. So you can either get them from Dotloop. If they're not in Dotloop, they're in zip forms. If they're not in zip forms, then they're in mdrealtor.org. So you'll be able to find those Maryland state documents on there, okay? So we click the box next to listing document, and now we're gonna go to open. So as we open these documents, it's gonna take a couple minutes to open up. And once it does, then we're gonna go to autofill, and we're gonna ask Dotloop to fill all of these documents with the information that we just typed into these details, okay? So it's gonna bring you to this screen for autofill so that it can verify the different roles that have been assigned thus far. So currently you're gonna have the seller, you're gonna have the listing agent, you're gonna have the listing brokerage's information, you're gonna have the property address information, and everything else that you've put in. And of course, you need to have your company name and all that good stuff here. And for the sake of the training, I'm not going to put all of it in while you guys look, but I just want to make sure that you know everything that's necessary. So legal description, you're going to get that from the tax record subdivision 2. All of this is important information. Then you go to autofill. And you pause there for just a second because it's going to autofill. Okay, so now we're going to walk through the document, because although it's in the process of autofilling your document, it is not 100%. So you're still going to have to scrub your documents to verify that the information has gone into the appropriate fields, and that if there's anything missing, you want to add it. So you see 2 roles have been assigned and 38 fields have been autofilled. That's what we just did there. So there are a couple of pages that won't autofill, so we'll start looking through those now. But I'm going to pause for just a moment. So the first document in our listing template is a letter to the seller. So this letter is simply meant to greet the seller and to thank them for allowing us to list their property, okay? You don't have to do anything with that document. The next document is very important because it's the seller's intake sheet. You're going to want to find out answers to these questions because your goal is to provide them with the best customer service experience possible. And you don't want to guess at that. You want to find out what things are most important to your seller, what things matter most to them in an agent, what they expect out of you in your brokerage, if there's anyone else who has a say-so in this process, what method of communication they prefer. And that's very important because some people only prefer email, some people only prefer text messages, some people only prefer phone calls or a variation of those. But find out in advance so that you have great communication throughout the process and there are no hiccups. All right. Then you want to ask them if they have any referrals up front, if there's anyone that they know that could utilize your services. Find out in advance what their desired price range is. Find out in advance also what their desired move date is. You want to know what your seller's desired price range is before you actually get there to your listing appointment. So what you're doing now, you're preparing your listing documents. This is preliminary, this is in advance, this is before you ever sit in front of the seller. Okay, so this intake form, you're going to get all of this information from your seller. By now, you would have already had the seller's name and property address and contact information for your seller, as you can see, seller's number and email address. But you're going to add all of the rest of this information. So yourself as the listing agent, the date that you're going to list the property, the list price, your full 6% commission there, what portion of that is the listing agent's commission and what portion you're going to pay to the buyer's agent, what your flat fee is, the mortgage balance that the seller has on the house, if there are any other liens or the number of liens on the property. So sellers don't often understand that a mortgage is an actual lien on the property. Oftentimes, however, it's not the only lien. Oftentimes, people will have a first mortgage, second mortgage, home equity line of credit. They have multiple things on property. So you just want to find out how many liens there are on the property, so that you can be prepared and you can get that information so that you can provide them with a good estimate or net sheet, okay? So the companies, you want to put that information down, and their mortgage lenders, you want to get that information from them in advance. Again, if they have any lines of credit. And here's one thing that you want to look out for that won't apply in most cases, but when it does, it's a really big deal. You need to find out in advance if they purchased their home using a down payment assistance program. Because when we're talking about this number of liens on the property, if they purchase with a down payment assistance program, that could be another almost hidden lien. And sometimes sellers will forget about it. And sometimes the down payment assistance programs have a forgiveness period whereby if they stay in the house for 3 years, it's forgiven, or 5 years, it's forgiven. But you want to ask in advance so that they don't have any surprises, okay? You also want to know if they're current on their mortgage, if they've had any bank notices. These are things you need to know so you know whether or not this is a distressed sale, okay? Very different type of way that we want to handle it if it is, so find out that information. Now, the information following is information that you want to get directly from your seller. Some of this information you'll find in your tax record, but I recommend that you always get this information from your seller no matter what the tax record says, because sometimes your tax record is going to be incomplete. Very often, in fact, it's going to be incomplete. And if a seller has 5 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, and 3 levels, and the tax record is only representing 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and 3 levels, you've got to go with what the seller is giving you, because maybe they didn't report whatever additions they did to the county, whatever the case is. You've got to make sure that you get this information from your seller, okay? And you'll verify it, of course, when you walk through the property. But find out if they have fireplaces, the basement type. So whether it's a full basement, fully finished, whether, it's an underground, simply improved but not finished. Find out what your house type is. Find out what the style of the house, the year built, flooring type, whether there's a garage, bonus rooms, additional structures, additional rooms. These are going to be your dens. These are going to be your bedrooms in the basement that don't necessarily count as bedrooms because they don't have a closet or a window or something to that effect, but they are additional rooms. Or it can be a sunroom, it can be a study, it can be all of the above, but find out what those things are because you're collecting this information so that you can complete a market analysis. And you've got to make sure that you have all of the appropriate information so as to be able to compare apples to apples, okay? So you want to get a list of upgrades from them. Find out what their upgrades are. If they have all stainless steel appliances and they have Viking appliances, or if they have Sub-Zero refrigerators, or whatever their upgrades are to the property. If it's the bathroom, the master bathroom is attached, or if it's the hallway bathroom, you want to know that information. You want to know what their master bathroom features are. If there is a tub shower combo, or if it's a separate soaking tub from a separate shower with a bench, you want to know that information so that when you're doing your market analysis, you're sure to compare apples to apples, okay? And there's your field for additional features. Okay, so we said HOA, you want to find out whether or not the property is encumbered by an HOA or a condo association. If so, you want to get that management company's information in advance, the contact person, the number, what that HOA or condo fee is, and what the frequency is, and whether or not they're current on it, okay? You also have an additional field down here for notes as well. So take as detailed and thorough notes as you can when you're going through this seller intake sheet. And this form is meant to be completed by you over the phone before you ever even meet with the seller, okay? So this is your homework. This is what you're doing in the background. So doing your due diligence in advance so that you can fill in these listing documents and so that you can complete your market analysis. All right. So once you get that information and you're ready to prepare your listing documents, then we'll go ahead and start walking through those now so you know what you need and where, okay? This is the first, you're understanding whom real estate agents represent. This is going to be required for all of your listings as well as each transaction that you do in real estate. This document is very easy for you to complete. You simply scroll on down to the second page and make sure that whichever party you're representing in a transaction, whether it be seller or buyer, You make the election at the top of the page by checking that off, and ensure that your firm name is there and your name as the salesperson is there. And the person that, let's see, you're working as the seller's agent. Here we are. Okay. So the sellers acknowledge receipt of this disclosure that Porterhouse International Realty Group and Jasmine Porter are working as the seller's agent. Now, if you were working as a buyer's agent, you would choose the appropriate fields there. This is where your seller will sign. Notice that there's a place at the bottom for the agent to sign, and this is not for you to sign unless the following terms are in effect, meaning that if your seller or buyer client, if they were unable or unwilling to acknowledge receipt of this disclosure, then and only then would you sign down the bottom. If they don't mind signing off on the document, which 99% of the time people will not mind signing this because it's merely a disclosure, then what you're going to do is you're simply going to assign this to no one, and you will not sign that field. Okay? Now scroll on down to your consent for dual agency. This document is extremely important as well, and it's going to be necessary with all of your transactions. Your consent for dual agency should include your firm name. I'm going to type that in there for you. All right, and who you're representing there. Now pay attention to something, because for whatever reason, this Dotloop account is not assigning this field to the seller. It only assigns the lower field to the seller. But unless there is a disclosed dual agency situation, this is the appropriate field for the sellers to sign. The first seller signature field above the affirmation of prior consent to dual agency line. So you are going to assign that to Sally Seller, and you're going to deselect the one at the bottom. So click on that at the bottom, go to assign, and assign that field to no one. And this document is very important because it gives your brokerage the right to try to sell this property for your seller as well as other brokerages. Okay, so the way that you want to communicate this with your seller is with this document. Now you, your entire team, your entire brokerage can all look for a buyer for your seller. Now, if and when you do find a buyer for your seller within your brokerage, then the seller has to come back, or you send this document to the seller again in order for them to then make an affirmation below this line. And this would simply be affirmation of prior consent to dual agency, in which case the buyers and the sellers have to sign this document again below this line to affirm that they are both aware that they are being represented by two separate agents from one brokerage. Okay? As we know, in the state of Maryland, one agent is not allowed to represent two parties to the transaction, but the brokerage is. Okay? So that's when that document will be necessary. If you are on a team, you do want to ensure that you have this document for every one of your transactions, which would be notification of a dual agency within a team. If this does apply to you, you simply assign this field to your client to sign off on, and you send it on over to your client for signatures. Okay? Now here is your listing agreement. This is your exclusive right to sell residential brokerage agreement. Crucial, make sure that everything is dated and all of the proper information is there. Sally Seller's mailing address needs to be added. The telephone number is crucial. Her email address, all of that information, as much as possible, you want to put that there. The brokerage's office address, you want to make sure that that's there as well. And I'll go ahead and just add it for the sake of the activity. Okay, so you want to add the fax number, your cell phone number, the office direct line, and for Porterhouse, that's the same always. That's your 775 best for me, or 775-237-8463. Okay, and your office fax, your 301-336-3989. Now, those two numbers are going to be the same always. The missing two are going to be for you as the listing agent. Be sure to put your email address in there also. The property is going to be listed by Porterhouse International Realty Group, and this is going to be the address for the property being listed, okay? So Dotloop did something a little bit weird because it didn't it mixed the addresses. So that's why you want to make sure that you definitely pay attention there. But that should say 8300 Cedar View Court. Okay, and as I make that update for you, you can see how it's supposed to be represented. Okay, so that's your property address. Now, paragraph 3, whether or not the property has ground rent. Most of the time in Prince George's County, you're not going to have ground rent. Other places, you do sometimes see ground rent. It's very common up in Baltimore. Every now and again, you'll see it in a more rural area, but most areas won't. But this is information that you don't need to guess on. You're going to ask the seller whether or not the property is being sold as fee simple or if it has ground rent. If it's being sold as fee simple, you're simply going to make sure that your initial fields there are there for your seller to sign, okay? Listing terms, terms for termination. You're going to make sure that you include your listing terms. I recommend that you do a year for your listing term. If your seller has, if they want to counter that with 6 months or something like that, then you counter that and you allow them to do 6 months. But if I were you, I would start off with a year. Now, I would not recommend going less than 6 months, oftentimes because there are unforeseen circumstances, oftentimes with sellers that cause things to sometimes drag a little bit further along. And you want to make sure that your listing is in full effect while you're working on that property, okay? Now, I will fill this piece in, the terms for broker termination. This needs to always be mutual agreement in writing, signed by both parties. Okay. All right, now that will protect you and the seller. You absolutely must put your list price there. If any of these things are missing, then this is not a full listing agreement. So you want to be sure to add that information. Your showing instructions, you're going to go to edit text and you're going to add your showing instructions. But this is information that you're going to ask of the seller. So once you've had a conversation with your seller, you've gotten your seller intake sheet together, you've gotten your market analysis together, now you're having a conversation with the seller about days and times that work well for them for showing, okay? So whatever that looks like, that might be Monday through Friday from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. or something of that nature. You're going to add it there. You're also going to add showing time because that's what we use in order to schedule showings. You're going to also add lockbox because that's something that we use to schedule showings also, okay? Now, your showing instructions are going to be a lot more detailed when you put them into showing time. This is merely for the listing agreement, okay? Now, what I will say is if you have a seller that says, okay, I'm listing now, but I want to make sure that we wait another 3 weeks before we make the property active, you want to indicate that right here. You want to make sure that this says to be made active within 3 weeks or just find the date and make that notation right here in your showing instructions because that's very important, okay? Aside from that, your listing, you're informing the seller that this listing is going to be marketed on the MLS and it's going to be across the internet also. And you want to deselect the options in this box because this is if your seller did not want the property marketed on the internet and if they did not want the property marketed on your matrix or Bright MLS. Okay, so we're going to assign that one to no one actually. So ensure that this box, the fields, the initial fields are there, are deselected and assigned to no one. That way, when you send it to your seller, they won't sign off on it accidentally. Okay, wait 1 second. All right, so as we scroll down to section C here, you see oftentimes for whatever reason, this Dotloop account will select this automatically for your seller. Deselect this because this paragraph is saying that your seller, they don't want the property marketed on the internet, and that they acknowledge that by not doing that, that could affect, their listing, like their proceeds and all that stuff. So you want to make sure that you deselect that because you don't want the seller to accidentally sign it. So to deselect it, you simply assign it to no one and make sure that the other field is assigned to no one as well, so that you don't have any accidental initials and then you end up having to go back and forth to do strike throughs and having them to reinitial that they didn't really mean to select that. Okay, so as we scroll on down to the bottom, my preference is to do both of these second columns, which says that the seller does not authorize the display of unedited comments or reviews, and that the seller does not authorize the display of automated estimates of value. Now, we both know that in the day and age that we live in, there are many commercial sites that are going to do this information. They're going to do this anyway, but we prefer as much as possible to have our client to not give consent to those things, because when they hire you as their realtor, they are giving you all of the information that you need to market their property appropriately and make sure that the information is accurate. Bright MLS is governed, and we make sure that the information that we put in there is accurate, and if not, they give us fines and all kinds of stuff. So we can't account for what's on a commercial website, and because we can't account for what's on a commercial website, we advise our sellers not to authorize those things. So we would simply, I'll show you a trick here. If you take this and drag it across both of them, you see how they both highlight or light up in green there. And when you do that, it'll allow you to deselect all of them at the same time, okay? And if you do the same thing again here, and you just drag that across multiple fields that you want to assign, it will then allow you to assign it all at once. All right, so we're going to scroll on down to coming soon, the listing status, which is one of my favorite newer features of Bright MLS. With coming soon, it allows for your sellers to have 21 days to get their property ready. Now, you will notice that when you're working with sellers, very often they're going to need a little bit of time to maybe declutter or to, spruce up the home a little bit or get the garden done, put some extra mulch, whatever it is that they need time to do to make sure that that property shows very well. That's that time, okay? So when you enter this as coming soon into Bright MLS, you get 21 days before it then converts to being active. Within that coming soon status, you can't have any showings, but it does whet the appetite of local buyers or buyers and agents who are looking for clients in the market, okay? So the seller here gives consent for you to make that property coming soon within 20 days of it being active. And I always recommend having that signed by your seller. Now, if your seller is more aggressive and they don't need the time, then they don't necessarily have to do coming soon, but I still recommend you getting it signed every time. Okay. Paragraph 8, consent to discuss other properties with the buyers at the seller's open house. I do not authorize, I prefer to say does not authorize, because if you're at the seller's property, then your goal is to sell their house. You're going to be talking selling features about their house, and you're not going to be talking about another property. So I recommend that you deselect that and you choose does not authorize. Now, it's the seller's choice, but this is what my preference is, to make sure that we're focused on selling the house that we're listing if we're doing an open house there. Now, if and when outside of that open house, the buyer lets you know, hey, that property does not work well for me and my family, we need a property with these criteria. Then you talk to them about another property, but not while at the open house, okay? So scroll on down to home security and audio, because your seller is going to have to sign there that they will not audio record people while people are at their listing. So every place that you see that says seller's signature, if it is appropriate, make sure that there is an initial or signature field for your seller to sign. If it is not something that your seller needs to sign, make sure it's deselected. And just pay attention to where you see the seller's initials, the space beside it. If it simply says initial, then you'll see that that can mean that it's assigned to no one. You see up at the top. But if it says seller, if that were to say SS for Sally seller, and then the one next to it said seller, then that would also allow your seller to sign that. So then you would want to deselect that or simply assign it to no one. Okay? Your broker's compensation. Your broker's compensation, that's where you're going to edit, and you're going to put your commission there as the listing agent. Your commission as the listing agent is going to be your 6% plus your brokerage fee. And well, actually, that's going to be termed your flat fee. So your flat fee, and that's going to be your $7.95 or $4.95, whatever you establish your flat fee as. But whatever you establish it as, it has to be the same for everybody. You can't change that flat fee once it's established. If you do, it's changed across the board, okay? That's where you're going to put your broker's compensation. Be sure that that's there. Now, your broker protection period. In the event that this listing were to expire, you want to make sure that there's a certain number of days for which you are protected, so that if a transaction goes through and it, was a short sale or something of that nature, and it took an extra couple months and now your listing has expired, now you're still due a commission because you've put an appropriate number of times here. You want to be sure so as not to put a small amount of time, like 20 or 30 days or something like that. I would put at least 180 days in that field just to protect you and your hard work, okay? Now, this paragraph, this is talking about a forfeiture of a buyer's earnest money deposit. When a buyer writes an offer on a property, most often it's going to be secured by an EMD or an earnest money deposit. In your listing agreement, this is what stipulates how that EMD is split between the broker and the seller in the event that it is forfeited. I recommend that you put in there 50% because you work very hard to procure and secure the buyer for that transaction, and those deposits will come through you and your brokerage, and the seller will be paid whatever you negotiate here, but I recommend 50%, okay? 15, authority to cooperate with other brokers. This is the field that gives you the authority to bring other brokers into your client's listing, okay? Now, in order to put this property into Bright MLS, you have to have a co-op brokerage fee. That's the fee that you're going to pay to the buyer's agent or sub-agent, whoever brings a buyer for your listing, okay? Now, this is the field where you're going to put 2.5% or 3%, whatever you choose as the listing agent that you want to pay to the buyer's agent. That is your choice, whether it be 2.5, 3%. Again, that's your choice, but you have to make sure that that's clearly outlined in your listing agreement, paragraph 15, okay? So we're going to make sure that each of these places, the seller needs to sign off on the appropriate field. And there's a whole lot more information in here that you're going to find in our contract training. For now, we're just going over how to complete the listing document. You can chime into the contracts training and look at one of the videos to go through each one of the paragraphs in details to understand the legalese and everything that's behind there, okay? All right, so paragraph 19 with regards to lead-based paint. If the property is built before 1978, you have to disclose that by having your seller sign there. If it was built during or after 1978, it's very important that you would choose the appropriate field and have your seller to sign off on that, okay? Very serious disclosure that has to be made, and everything that is not appropriate, you simply want to deselect it, okay? So remember, we talked about choosing multiple fields. Let's see if it's going to be friendly to me today. All right, so I'm just going to choose no one for all of those. And then I'm simply going to assign the appropriate one for my seller. We're going to say this property was built during or after 1978. All right, so now there's one field which is appropriate for my seller to sign. All right, so as we scroll on down, here you see 19B, renovation and repair of painting for a property. This is where the seller simply acknowledges that if the property was built before 1978, then it likely was built with lead-based paint. So if they had any of the paint removed, it must have been done by someone that was EPA certified. This doesn't require them to do anything at the moment. This is merely an acknowledgement, just like your lead-based paint acknowledgement. So all sellers will need to sign off on that, okay? So you will notice that we're simply going through them for the sake of the training. So you will see some that still say initial or seller, whatever that is. But as you are doing it for the sake of your listing, you want to be sure that you deselect everything that you do not want your seller to sign And I can't say that enough, because I promise you there will be a time or two where you send something over on these electronic documents and you'll get it back and your seller has signed in places that you didn't want them to sign. All right. So paragraph 20 down at the bottom. So after B, you see this acknowledgement here. So seller acknowledges that the property is or is not served by a public water or wastewater facility for which deferred water and sewer charges have been established by a recorded covenant or declaration. This is information that you're going to get from your seller. If the property is served by such an entity, then they're going to initial here. If it is not, then they're going to initial there. And everywhere else, you're going to deselect for your seller to sign off on. All right, let's see. Deselect here. It's giving me a broader range than I want, or you can simply click on them one by one, and you'll see that they're highlighted, and the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are going to be affected by your assigning. All right, and we're just going to make sure that those are not assigned to seller or Valley seller. All right, so paragraph number 21, authority to disclose existing offers. This is your seller's choice. It is merely asking your seller whether or not they authorize you to disclose existing offers. Because as the listing agent, you're going to receive offers on the property, and oftentimes, especially in this market, you're going to receive multiple offers if your property is priced right and if it shows well. And in those cases, you are not allowed to share any of the details of the offer with any of the competing agents. However, if your seller so chooses, you are allowed to disclose the existence of another offer. Merely the existence, not any of the details, not the price, not the contingencies, the terms, nothing about that offer can you share with another agent, okay? So if that agent's calling for their buyer and they just want to know, hey, would you let me know what you have in hand? You can't share that. But if your seller allows you to, then you can disclose it. And I know I said that a couple times because that's very important to know. You represent the seller, okay? Now, this is something that you want to make sure that you explain to your seller, because some buyers, when they find out that there are offers on the property already, it encourages them to be competitive and submit their highest and best. On the other hand, with other buyers, it'll make them say, well, I don't want to be in a bidding war, so I'm not going to submit an offer at all. And because you don't know what type of buyer is on the other end of that, this is why the seller gets to choose what they want to do. We recommend disclosing those existing offers so that we can get more competition and get more bids on the property, okay? Home warranty, paragraph 22. As a brokerage, we do provide a home warranty for all of our sellers. So we are partnered with HWA Home Warranty, and our sellers actually get a free home warranty that they do not pay anything for while they're listed with Porterhouse International Realty Group. Their home warranty, should they desire it, covers a whole lot of features to their property that they are able to use to satisfy terms of a property inspection and so forth and so on. Okay, so you're simply going to select that the broker does offer a home warranty, and then the seller gets to choose whether or not they desire the home warranty. So you want to encourage your sellers to get a home warranty. They don't have to have the one that we partner with HWA. They can choose any home warranty, although HWA is a tremendous benefit because they don't pay for it. They don't pay anything until settlement, and they get to use it as if it was paid in full. Not only that, they get up to 6 months. As long as the client is listed with you as a Porterhouse agent, then that's one of the benefits that we offer to our client. So make sure that you share that information with the sellers because it's very important, and it'll save them a lot of money in the event that they need to do repairs or whatever the case may be. All right. So let's see. Paragraph number 23. You're simply disclosing whether or not the seller is exempt or is not exempt from providing property disclosures. If the seller is exempt, it will be based on the terms of paragraph number 23. If the seller is not exempt, it's also based on the terms of paragraph number 23. Now, in the state of Maryland, however, the seller does not have to disclose even if they are not exempt, okay? The seller has a choice as to whether or not they would like to do a disclosure or disclaimer, and we'll go through that when we get to those documents. All right, so we're going to scroll on down. So B here, as you can see, 25B, you're asking the seller whether or not the property is encumbered by any easements. Okay, so if the property does not have any easements, then you're going to have your seller to initial off on number 1, so B1. If the property is subject to easements, then you're going to have your seller to initial B2, and then you're going to choose the appropriate easements that apply. And then you're going to ask your seller for the corresponding reports. And if they have provided them, you're going to select that they have provided. If they have not provided any of the reports, then you're going to select that they have not provided any of the reports. Okay, so you scroll on down. You don't have to fill in anything in this paragraph, but I want to point this out just for your knowledge. If your seller is a non-resident, then there's a non-resident tax that they're going to be charged at settlement. So this is something that the title company will have to withhold, or they may have to pay directly to Uncle Sam, but you want to make sure that they are aware of that. Okay, and there's some information in the event that they need to reach out to the comptroller's office or MD taxes, there's information for them. All right, paragraph 29, we've talked a lot about this in our contracts training, so I will not belabor it, but I will just mention that you need to ask your seller if your seller is a citizen of the United States, because if they are not a citizen of the United States, you need to know whether or not they have any outstanding taxes or liabilities against the property. If they have outstanding taxes, then that could become a really big problem if they're not a citizen of the United States. But you've got to know that information in advance. All right, so paragraph 32, this is going to be the last of your residential brokerage agreement for listings, okay? Your exclusive right to sell. But there are going to be various addenda that are attached here too, but this is the last of this 8-page document. So go ahead in paragraph 32 and select whichever of the addenda are going to be attached. You're always going to have your consent for dual agency. So you're going to have, if the property was built before 78, you'll have your lead-based paint disclosure. You need the financial condition of the property for each one of your listings. You're going to need inclusions and exclusions from each one of your listings also. You're going to need lockbox. You're going to need that for each one of your listings. If the property was built before 1978, then that's when this information is going to apply, your lead poisoning prevention program and that Maryland residential lead disclosure. I recommend having the disclosure whether the property was built before 78 or not, just to disclose that information. But the other one will not be necessary. Okay, so if these are necessary addenda, then you add them. If the property was built before 1978, then you're also going to add your protect your family from lead in your home. Aside from that, your seller will sign here, and you as the listing agent will sign where it says broker or authorized representative, as you are an authorized representative of Porterhouse International Realty Group. Okay. Next, your inclusions. As you can see in our autofill, it filled in some of the appropriate information, but for whatever reason, the dates didn't come through. So you want to be sure that you add dates to each one of the pages. Make sure that your dates are there, your seller's name, the property address, your brokerage's information where appropriate, so that all of these are accurate. And we have, let's assign that to anyone. And we'll go ahead and put okay. Today is actually the 4th. So we'll go ahead and add that. For whatever reason, the drop-down box didn't allow us to choose the date, so we'll put that in there. All right. Now, your inclusions and exclusions, this is a very important document for your seller. When your buyer submits an offer on the property, the residential contract of sale also includes a space that outlines inclusions and exclusions. As a listing agent, it's going to be your job to make sure that the buyer submits matches what the seller wants to convey. So everything that's included are items that are going to convey with the property in the sale. Everything that is not included will not convey with the property, okay? So be sure that this is correctly filled in by your seller. If the seller wants you to fill it in, that's fine. You do it and you ask them the question, you send it to them and ask them to approve it before you include it with the documents. Because whatever you put here that it's supposed to convey with the property needs to be there at settlement, okay? Any additional inclusions that are not listed there that your seller would like to leave, it may say chandelier, or it may say the removable kitchen island, or built-in bookcases or something like that. Whatever those additional inclusions are, you add them there. And your exclusions, if there's something that's not listed up there, but the buyer would see it when they come to tour, but it's actually not going to come with the property, you want to make sure that you list that in the exclusions. All right. Now, your leased items, in the event that your seller has fuel tanks or propane and solar panels, you want to make sure that you include that information here because those are leased items. And it could even be your ADT system, anything that's leased. So the seller's intention with regards to those leased items are as follows, and that's to transfer or convey them with the sale of the property, and that's what you would put. So this is where you want to highlight that information so that when your buyer who's looking at your disclosures online, they won't be surprised if they see the solar panel. They know that they have to go ahead and assume that payment for the solar panels or assume the payment for your ADT system if that's something that the seller does not own. All right. Utilities, you want to make sure that you put your utilities right here and you ask your seller these things and you put the appropriate information in those fields. All right. One second here. So here is, all right, so we're going to stop right here for part 1 of preparing our listing documents, and we're going to pick up with part 2, and we'll begin at the Maryland Residential Property Disclosure Disclaimer Statement.